All right, folks, to start us off this week, we are actually going to take two things that we have discussed in the last couple weeks and combine them. So this is kind of a week for putting it all together. So let's real quickly review what we've done in our last 2 weeks. One of the things that we've done is we have talked about the distributive property. And I want you to remember what this property is used for. This property is used whenever I need to take a number like 5 and I need to multiply it by a group, like 2x minus 3. Now, real quickly here, I want to remind you about the members of your group. The first member of your group here is 2x. And then I'm going to leave this minus sign in here with the 3. So I'm going to leave that with the 3. So that means the other member of my group is a negative 3. So remember, that was something that we tried to do there at the end when we were talking about distributive, is to recognize that that minus sign stays with the 3 and makes him a negative 3. So distributive property tells me to multiply my 5 by each member of my group. So I would do 5 times 2x. 5 times 2 is 10. Don't forget to reattach that x. And then we do 5 times a negative 3, which is a negative 15. So I would put minus 15. Keep that negative with that 15 to show that he's negative. Remember at this point that that would be done. I can't do 10x minus 15 because these two terms are not like terms. One of them has the variable x. The other has no variable, so that makes them not like terms, and I can't combine those. Let's do one more distributive property example. Let's say I want to take the number negative 3 and multiply it by the group 5x plus 1. So when I look at this, the members of my group are first of all that term 5x, and then I'm going to keep that plus sign in there with the 1, which makes him a positive 1. So distributive property tells me to multiply negative 3 by each member of this group. So I'm going to do negative 3 times 5x first, which is a negative 15x. And then I'm going to do a negative 3 times a positive 1, which is a negative 3. So I'll put minus 3 for that negative 3. And again here, this problem at this point would be done, because negative 15x and negative 3 are not like terms. This term has a variable part of x. This term has no variable part, so they cannot be combined. So distributive property, taking a number and multiplying it by a group. And we do that by multiplying each member of the group by that number. Then, last week, we worked on combining like terms. So we saw problems like 5a squared b minus 2a plus 3ab minus 8a squared b minus 10ab. Now remember, the terms are the parts of this problem. So here is one term, 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms. The like terms are the ones that have the same variable part. Oh, and my term is covered up. I'll deal with that in a minute. Okay, so here's what we did on this. Starting out from the beginning, here is my first term, 5a squared b. The variable part of this term, I'm going to highlight it just so you'll see it a little better. The variable part of this term is a squared b. So a is to the second power, b doesn't have an exponent. Now, what you need to remember is that a like term for this will have to have exactly that same variable part. It'll have to have an a to the second and a b and nothing else. So this would not be a like term. The a is not to the second power, and it doesn't have the b. This is not a like term because the a is not to the second power. This is a like term because it has both of the things it needs. It needs a to the second and it needs b. So I want you to notice this has exactly the same variable part. So I am going to put a red box around that term as well. Remember to let the term keep that sign that's in front of it because that belongs to him. So now, because these are like terms, I'm going to combine. And I'm going to combine by working with these numbers. So look what they're telling me to do. 5 minus 8 is a negative 3. And remember then that I let it keep the same variable part. So both of these were a to the second b terms, so I keep that. Okay? Now, switching colors and moving on to my next term in line, I have a negative 2a, a minus 2a. So I keep that minus with the 2 to show that he's negative. Notice on this one that my last name, my variable part is just an a. Anything that is a like term for him can only have that. It can only have that a. So this would not be a like term. It has the a, but it also has a b, which makes it not like him. This one out here, same thing. It has an a, just like negative 2a, but he also has a b. So he has that extra in there that he shouldn't have. So what that means is negative 2a doesn't have a like term up here, so I'm just going to move him down. Now, for my last pair of terms here, I have plus 3ab. Notice the variable part of that has an a and a b with no exponents. This would be the like term for that because it has an a and a b and neither one of them have exponents. So both of those end with the variable part ab. I would combine these by doing what the numbers say. Okay, my numbers tell me to do a positive 3 minus 10. A positive 3 minus 10, which would be a negative 7. And then I would bring down that same variable part that they had in common, which is AB. So this is how we combined our like terms. The like terms have to have the same variables. Those variables have to be raised to the same powers. And when you have that, you can combine those. So these are the skills we've worked on for the last couple of weeks. Now what we're going to do is kind of put it all together. So this week, we are going to be working on simplifying expressions. Simplifying expressions. And notice that when you hear the word simplify, that should make you think, make it simpler, okay? So here's what you need to know. To simplify expressions, it's really a two-step process. Step 1 is to distribute if necessary. So when I see the directions simplify from here on out, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute if it's necessary. Now, how will I know if it's necessary? Well, I'll know it's necessary if I see a number being multiplied by a group. So there would have to be parentheses there to show that group. In simplifying, step 2 is to combine like terms. And again, we're going to add on here at the end, if necessary. So we will look at the terms that we have and see if any of them have exactly the same variable part. And if we see that they do, then we will combine those. So from here on out, when you see the word simplify, I want you to distribute if necessary, and then combine like terms if necessary. Now, one of the things I want to say here is that as you're doing this, you need to be extra careful with your signs, your positives and your negatives. And then you also need to make sure that you use a calculator to check your multiplications and your adding and your subtracting, because, you know, those are the common places, the signs, the adding and the subtracting, that we're going to make little mistakes and miss these problems. Please watch these examples that I'm getting ready to do for you and make sure you're understanding. All right, so here's the first problem we're going to simplify. We're going to do 6 times, in parentheses, 4x minus 5. So we're going to simplify this expression. Step 1 is to distribute if necessary. On this problem, it is definitely necessary for me to distribute because I see parentheses and I see a number 6 being multiplied by a group. In that group, I have 2 members. I have a positive 4x, he is the first member, and I'm going to keep that minus in there with that 5 so I can see that the second member of my group is that negative 5 right there. So 6 has to be multiplied by each of those members. So we are going to do 6 times 4x. 6 times 4 is 24. And then I bring down and attach the x to that answer. Then I'm going to do 6 times the second member of my group. 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. So I write minus 30 on my paper. So I have distributed. It was necessary and I have done it. Step 2 is to combine like terms if necessary. Now notice here I only have 2 terms. 24x minus 30. I only have 2 terms. Now, are they like terms? Well, to decide, I look at the variable part. So the variable part for this term is an x. So I'm going to highlight that. The variable part for this term is an x. That's all he has, is just an x. The variable part for the second term is missing. There is no variable part there. So are these like terms? The answer is no. They are not like terms because one of them has an x. The other one doesn't have that same variable part. So what that means is 24x minus 30 is my answer. It is not necessary to combine like terms. That problem is done. Okay, let's take a look at this problem. 16x minus 7 plus 9 minus 20x. Now, as I'm writing this down, let me remind you, when you're writing your problems on your paper, don't be squishy. So don't try to squish things into a small amount of space. Give your problems room to move. Give them room where you can see what you're actually working with. All right, so on this problem, the first thing we are going to do to simplify it is distribute if necessary. So I look at this problem. Anywhere in it do I see a number being multiplied by a group? And the answer is I don't. There are no parentheses in this problem, so I do not need to distribute. So I move on to step 2. Combine like terms if necessary. Now I want you to notice that this problem has 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. Some of these may be like terms. So let's see what we can do with this. So I'm going to start out by looking at term number 1. Now remember when you're doing this part of it that highlighters, colored pens, colored pencils can come in handy to mark those like terms. So 16x. The variable part of that term is just a plain old x. That's all he has is an x. No exponents, no anything else, just that x. So a like term will have to have exactly the same variable part, just an x. Notice that your negative 7 doesn't have a variable part. Your positive 9 doesn't have a variable part. But when I get out here to the end, this last term has exactly that same variable part. He has that plain old x. So that means that this term is a like term for 16x. So I'm going to put a red box around him, and I want to remind you here to make sure that you grab that sign in front of him, because that minus sign belongs with that 20. Let it stay with that 20. It makes him a negative. So now we're going to combine these. Since they are like terms, we can combine. So we're going to do what this says. This says to do a positive 16 minus 20. So if I do a positive 16 minus 20, I'm going to get a negative 4x. So I'm going to write that down. Now, let's change colors. And let's go to the next term in line. The next term in line is a negative 7. He doesn't have a variable part. So look at the only term that's left. He doesn't have a variable part either. So what that means is these two guys are like terms. Now I want you to notice again that I have kept the negative with the 7. I've kept the positive with the 9. Those signs belong to them. Okay? So to combine these, let's do what it says. It says to do a negative 7 plus 9. And if I do a negative 7 plus 9, I get a positive 2. So I'm going to put plus 2. So I didn't need to distribute. I checked for it. It wasn't necessary. I have now combined like terms. It was necessary to do that. So negative 4x plus 2 is my simplified answer. So I want you to notice in this first example, I only had you distribute. And I want you to notice in the second example, I only had you do the like terms. Now let's look at a problem where you have to do both of the steps. So we're going to have 4 times 5x minus 1 minus 8x. This is the next expression we are going to simplify. So step 1 when you're simplifying is to distribute if necessary. It is necessary because I have the number 4 being multiplied by the group 5x minus 1. So I am going to take that 4 and multiply it by each member of the group. Well, what are those members? The first member of that group is 5x. I'm going to let that minus stay with that 1, and I realize then that my second member of my group is a negative 1. So 4 is going to get multiplied by both of those. So I'm going to do 4 times 5x. 4 times 5 is 20. Reattach that x. I'm going to do 4 times negative 1, which is negative 4. So I write down minus 4. So I get 20x minus 4. I do not distribute the 4 to this last guy over here because notice he is outside of the parentheses. So what you're going to do is you're just going to bring down this minus 8x and put it in your problem. So I have distributed. It was necessary. I have done it. Now, step 2 is to combine like terms if necessary. Notice that right now I currently have 1, 2, 3 terms. So I'm going to combine the ones that are alike. So take a look at your first term. Notice that he has a last name of x. Just x. No exponents, no other variables. Just x. So look at the other two terms. Does anybody have that same variable part? And the answer is yes. Right there is another term that has just x as the last name. So I'm going to take my red pen and put him in a box as well so that I can see that these two are like terms and I can combine those. So let's do what it says. What does it say to do? It says to do 20 minus 8. So if I do 20 minus 8, I get 12. And then remember, we let them keep the variable part that they had in common. They keep that last name of x. So 20x minus 8x is 12x. Now, what about the minus 4? You can see there are no like terms for minus 4. So we just bring it down into the answer. So for this problem, after I do both steps, distribute, combine like terms, I end up with 12x minus 4 as my answer. So these problems you're doing today, you're not really learning anything new. You are taking the two things that we've worked on for the last couple of weeks and combining them. All right, let's start over on this one. We're going to do 2 times 4x plus 9 plus 7x minus 15. All right, step 1 is going to be to distribute if necessary. It is necessary because we have the number 2 being multiplied by the group 4x plus 9. So you will always know that you have to distribute if you see parentheses in your problem. So what are the members of the group? Well, the first member of the group is 4x. The second member of the group, I'm going to let this plus sign stay with him, so I know he is a positive 9. So 2 is going to get multiplied by both of those members. So I do 2 times 4x. 2 times 4 is 8. Reattach x. Then I do 2 times positive 9, positive 18. So plus 18. So that gives me 8x plus 18. These other two terms, I'm just going to move down just like they are. Notice the distributive property ends right here where the parentheses end. The other stuff just moves down. So now I combine like terms if necessary. So look at your first term. Your first term is 8x. His variable part is just x. So do any of these other terms have a variable part that is just an x? Well, yeah, right here, this guy does. So I'm going to let that plus sign stay with him. And I'm going to put him in a red box as well, so I know that these are like terms. So now we do what this says. We do 8x plus 7x. 8 plus 7 is 15. And then we reattach that variable part, that x. So 15x. All right, the next term in line is plus 18. What is his variable part? Well, the answer is he doesn't have one. So that means that the like term for him can't have a variable part either. So when I look out here at the end, I see another term that does not have a variable part. So I'm going to mark him in blue as well. So I know that this guy and this guy are like terms. They are like terms because they both lack that variable part. So we do what it says. Notice I let the plus stay with the 18 and the minus stay with the 15. They belong to them. So we're going to do a positive 18 minus 15. Positive 18 minus 15, which is positive 3. So because it's positive 3, I should put plus 3. So I distributed. It was necessary. I have combined like terms. It was necessary. So this should be my simplified answer. 15x plus 3. All right, next up. Let's do one more. All right, on this problem, we are going to simplify. So we are first going to distribute if necessary. It is necessary to distribute because right here I have the number 2 being multiplied by the group 3x minus 1. So let's look at the members of this group. 3x is the first member. I'm going to let that minus sign stay with that 1. So the second member of my group is a negative 1. Now, I want to point out something here. I want you to notice that the plus 2 is right beside those parentheses. I'm going to highlight that. So this plus 2, whoops, wrong thing. This plus 2 is what I'm going to distribute. This 8x is just extra stuff. He is not next to the parentheses, so that is not what I'm distributing. So what you are going to do is take this 8x and just move him down to the next line. And now we're going to do our distributive property. So we'll do a positive 2 times 3x. Positive 2 times 3 is positive 6. And then I reattach that x. Please don't forget to reattach variables as you're doing this, because if you do, it will mess you up on your like terms. So watch for the details. All right, now we're going to do a positive 2 times a negative 1. So a positive 2 times a negative 1 is a negative 2. So we'll put minus 2. Minus because he is negative. Now again, notice here the parentheses end at that point. So the rest of this stuff is just going to move down. Okay, now we've distributed. Now it's time to combine like terms if necessary. So let's see if it's necessary. Let's start with term number 1. Term number 1 is 8x. Look at just the variable part. What is it? The variable part is just an x. No more, just an x. So do other terms have just an x? Well, yeah, they do. Plus 6x has just an x. That's the same variable part. And then minus 4x has just an x. So all three of the terms that I just put red boxes around are like terms because they all have just an x as their variable part. So we're going to combine these. Do what it says. You're going to do 8 plus 6, which is 14, minus 4, which would put you at 10. So 8 plus 6 is 14, minus 4 is 10. So you're going to put 10, and don't forget to reattach that variable part, which was an x. All right, now, moving on to your next term, you have a negative 2, a minus 2. Let that minus stay with him. That belongs to him. Notice that this term does not have a variable part. No variables at all. So that makes this plus 7 like him because he doesn't have any variables at all either. So remember, it's the variables that determine if you're like terms or not. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's just those variables. So we're going to do what this says. It says to do a negative 2 plus 7. Let these signs stay with their numbers. So negative 2 plus 7. That is a positive 5. So we put plus 5. So now that we have distributed and combined the like terms, this is my final answer. So in all of today's problems, you are going to be using both of the skills that we've been working on. If anything that I have said in this video doesn't make sense or you need some extra help, please contact me. I'll be more than happy to set up a Zoom call with you so we can talk. Give the problems today a try. Show your work neatly on paper and use the strategies you see me using here. Draw the arrows when you distribute from that number to each member of the group. Mark your like terms in color because those things will make life easier for you. So any questions, be sure and let me know. Thanks a bunch.